leaders, heads of state and government, to draft a new agenda, one that we will draft together, we will build and roll out together. So yes, there is a change of language, but deep down, it is built upon what we have been doing over the past few years, 10 years of reinvesting in the continent, making bold decisions. When we talk about that, we're talking about the culture, sport, the economy, and the rest.
You speak of reinvention, focusing on economic matters to renew this partnership with Africa. But given the budgetary restrictions of France, do you have the means to compete with powers like China and the United States?
Yes, quite clearly, because obviously the United States, they cut off their funding for ideological reasons. France, ever since I was first elected, we actually increased our development aid, development financing through our multi-year budgets. But we had difficult budgetary years, fiscal years, so we had to bring about some changes. But it is actually well above what we had back in 2017. But deep down, and this is what we heard from presidents here, African countries aren't calling for budgetary aid, they're calling for investment. This is a way of changing the paradigm that we are operating in. It's not just saying, we're going to give you money. And oftentimes back home, French taxpayers, they say, hang on, you say that we don't have enough money for universities, for schools, for the hospitals, but you're spending money around the other side of the world. No, we are investing. Yesterday, we had the coalition of investors and entrepreneurs that we brought here. And yesterday, we announced 23 billion euros in investment. Private money. But that creates jobs, it changes lives. And this isn't state money. There was an additional 14 billion euros in investment from French companies across the African continent in all domains: IT, digital infrastructure, energy. And in addition to that, 9 billion euros that we mobilized through African investors, African entrepreneurs investing in their own continent. And that's what this relationship is about. It's a partnership. The forum that we have created, it's a coalition of new operators, brings together French and African entrepreneurs for the first time together. So you can see it's private money, projects that we're drafting together, co-investing.
Mr. President, you are promoting a business approach. Win-win, as you say.
Now, it's not just business. There's sport, there's culture, across all sectors. But this is no longer focused just on security and safety. It's focused a bit less on government aspect as well.
I understand. But nonetheless, economic matters have been foremost at the summit. You say it's win-win. But today, a businessman who wants to go to Africa can do so easily. And the opposite is not true. How do you plan to solve this problem of visas, a chronic problem that African businessmen complain about regularly?
So we have changed a lot over the past few years. We created business councils in pretty much every country with our own organizations. We have Business France, for example, that was set up for that purpose. So every year through Choose France, we have African representation with investors, with business leaders who want to invest in Europe, and we get the conditions ready for them. We also created a system with Business France and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs to put in place passports, if you want, talent passports for key industry segments with visas, fast-track processes, so that we can focus on investors, business leaders, talented people, be they French or European, with talent to travel around the continent. And what we wanted to do at this summit is to focus on country by country with the African Union to find ways to facilitate that movement of people. Actually, this morning we had a very interesting conversation with Aliko Dangote. Now I'm going to quote him. I hope he won't take unkindly to me quoting him, but he's one of the biggest investors, Nigerian investors in Africa. And he said, you know, I myself struggle to travel around the African continent. So sometimes what we could criticize Europe and France of doing is the same in Africa. So through the African Union, they're going to put in place the biggest system to facilitate circulation and movement of business leaders. And we're going to do the same with Europe. Because what you're going to create, we're going to create in Europe as well. It's like a mirror image, constantly improving.
Mr. President, you have emphasized the importance of youth. You talked about it yesterday and again today. Yet today in France, an African student must pay tuition fees that are equivalent to 16 times what a European student pays. Do you understand why young people feel that this is unfair treatment?
Well, actually, no. I mean, you can say we do things right. You don't have to say "but" after every sentence, because otherwise we always feel like we're trying to defend what we're doing. But in Europe, if I were to compare France, Germany, and England, well, everything, university education is free, but we actually have to pay for the social security system for French students, for European students. And it's currently the same for non-European students as well. But if you go to the UK, to Germany, to Italy, you pay more than we do. You actually pay a lot more than we do in France. So it's very good that we have this difference here, because this means that universities can actually charge non-EU students. Because in France, a student that doesn't pay, well, it's got to be paid by someone, and that's taxpayers. But taxpayers, they are going to say, hang on, I'm paying the tertiary education for students from around the world. And I actually have students from around the world saying, is the education you get in France actually any good if it's free? Canada costs a lot of money. You go to the United States, don't even talk about the United States, China, India. We're actually one of the only countries in the world where university education is free. So we need to get beyond that image.
For African students.
Yes, but African students, well, it's going to be a country-by-country basis. Universities, they will get to make their own decisions. Some universities was actually charge more than what they currently do today, was actually nothing. But their studies will, or their education, will be a lot less than what we have in other European countries. And we're going to have bursary systems through Campus France and universities. So through this reform, France will stay one of the cheapest countries in the world for its university system. So we need to be consistent with our own principles. French taxpayers, they aren't paying to have free education for people from around the world. It's not the case in any country elsewhere, so why should it be the case in France? What we will do is we'll provide support to talents from Kenya, from Senegal, from Côte d'Ivoire, who have been identified as talented people to sit down and work with universities, and then universities, they can choose to either charge fees or not, and Campus France will help, and we will have an attractive policy.
Another concern for African youth is the reform of the CFA franc. You said that you have done your job and that now Africans must make their own decisions. But do they really have a choice when exchange rates are set by the ECB, the European Central Bank, or when the CFA franc is still used in Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso? Why does France continue to support the guarantee of the CFA franc convertibility?
Well, first of all, I didn't say it in those terms. The session we had earlier on the economy, I said exactly what everyone has to do. And I said, if we want to have more people investing in Africa, we need, quite clearly, to have international financial structures that are more effective. We need to better use public money across all institutions, World Bank, IMF, Development Bank, regional banks, and they need to trigger more private money coming in. Then, we, as Europeans, we need to do the job that we haven't done well in the past. The current solvency rules that we have today, the norms that are being enforced, they discourage many institutions from investing in the African continent, particularly from the financial sector. So this is a reform that I am calling for.
Shouldn't we fully carry out the 2019 reform?
Yep, I am getting to my answer to your question, because I'm not just trying to sideline any of your questions. So what we need to do then is put in place a guarantee mechanisms. This is actually one of the major steps forward from this summit. We need to have a guarantee mechanisms for initial losses to allow private investors to come to the African continent more, because otherwise they're going to invest elsewhere. Now, for the reform on the CFA franc, which isn't an issue for this section of Africa, but for West Africa, this is something for which back in 2019 in Côte d'Ivoire, I took on my full responsibilities. I said, we're going to change the rules of the game. We're going to move on and provide warranties. And those warranties, they mean that the exchange rate is not going to be completely floating. So we changed the reserve systems, and it's now up to African leaders to take on this initiative. I actually spoke with President Ouattara on that exact topic a few weeks ago. And I know that he spoke about a tier with a number of presidents from the region who aren't from WEMU. And they said what's in the interest of West Africa today is to say that we stop with the anti-CFA franc discourse. We move beyond the system and its constraints.
But it's not the case today.
Well, I mean, I can't make the decisions for them. I'm not the one in charge of monetary policy for Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, or the others.
But isn't that just what has led youth to reject France?
Well, I don't see people rejecting France. I don't see it wherever I go. Wherever I go for walking or for runs, I meet people. No one speaks like that. But you do see it online.
In West Africa,
Yes, online, but you need to be quite clear that there are some people from the youth who are pushed by these activists, these online activists, who are relaying narratives that are being created by foreign powers, the true colonizers of the 21st century, like Russia and the others. So what we need to do is get back to facts and to say that there is no reason to not like France today. But what I want to say about monetary policy, it's up to West African leaders to make the decisions. I've said, look, all the options are on the table. I've taken on my share of responsibility for our side of the discussion. I asked Mr. Severino, in whom I have great faith, to go out and meet with these leaders to create a new momentum. In the meantime, there were many issues, COVID, war in Ukraine, and all of the fallout from that. So now what I'm waiting for is from them to really take this forward. I think we need more regional integration from a monetary and a trade point of view, for it to be as vast as possible, so that we can cover as many countries as possible from ECOWAS. What Africa needs is more trade integration, economic integration, more monetary balance. But quite simply, what I see today is that people say, we still need guarantees on reserves, because otherwise we're going to be too hard hit on our currency. And I said, if we're going to do it, then you would have said that you're abandoning us. So that's why I say we provide guarantees of stability, but for the rest of it, it's up to you.
Mr. President, you have been discussing peace and security with your African counterparts. On April 25th, Bamako was attacked. The Minister of Defense was assassinated. Kidal fell. The French army, of course, withdrew from Mali in 2022, but it had been stationed there for 10 years, and much was sacrificed. Looking back now, what would you have done differently to avoid the situation we are in today?
Well, first, thinking of the people in Mali and what they have been suffering for many years is that they are really just punching bags for terrorist groups. And then they have fallen foul of the decisions made by those people who ran the coup, who chose their own safety over the fight against terrorism. So in France, since 2013, with my predecessor François Hollande, who made a decision on request of President Keita to avoid Mali splitting and to stave off the advancing terrorist groups from the north, he sent out our armed forces to help Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso for many years, up until 2020. And even a bit longer, even into 2021. And they fought with bravery and commitment. They had a clear mandate. Upon request of sovereign states, backed by regional organizations, ECOWAS, and I think of those soldiers, their families, the fallen soldiers. And after that, I would like to say, I'm sorry to say that it was met with ingratitude and a lot of false information. I'm quite angry, in fact, with the leaders and all those who made such unacceptable remarks. But nevertheless, now it's up to the Malian people, and they are suffering. The whole region is suffering. So turning back to 2017, we had the G5 Sahel, an alliance for security development, and we had to be more stringent on that. We should have called on leaders to move forward with more administrative development programs, emancipation programs, to create opportunities in those regions where terrorists were running rife. But ultimately, we came there almost as a guarantee for security. So I think we should have been stricter and more hard-hitting in the discussions that we had earlier on in the game. But what I do see is that there has been fundamental transformation over these past few years, and that transformation is paying off. We completely rethought the way we provided security and peace for the African continent. We took stock of the past, like what we're doing with currencies, to say that deep down, it's not because we've always been here with military bases, with French soldiers, that we should continue to do so forevermore. So tell us what you need. This is a partnership, so you tell us what you need. You make the requests for security if need be. And we have rethought the way we have done things. We've closed down bases, we've shrunk certain bases, and we have rebaptized them, renamed them with African names. And together with African armed forces and with each country and with our French forces, we have worked together. We've actually created new partnerships to train, to provide equipment, to support. And I think it's a healthier relationship. It also changes the perception, especially of the youth, because these large bases that we used to have, they were seen, and actually this is the image that was taken by a lot of people saying, you know, the French are here to colonize you once again. They've got soldiers, thousands of soldiers there. But we have leaders now with outdated positions, but that time is over. We have created a sense of normalcy. We now have a partnership of equals, responsible partnerships. It really is a partnership of equals.
Indeed, Mr. President, on Sunday you said that Mali had not made the best decision in asking France to leave. What did you mean by that? France should have remained?
Well, it's just what I said. I think their comments were quite disrespectful of our soldiers. But I don't think they made the right decision back in 2022-21, saying that their priority wasn't to fight against terrorism, and I think it's a great shame.
Why not fully withdraw from Africa?
Well, we did pull out of Mali, but we haven't left Africa, because we can't say that we are here to rebuild and co-invest and co-construct, because on one side you've got people saying, okay, you're going to give us money, but when you say that you need help, we're just going to turn and look the other way? No, in Europe, when Europe came under attack, we worked together, we trained them, we provided them with equipment, we created the Coalition of the Willing. We called on other countries to help out in the India-Pacific region. So why should it be any different for Africa, where, for security reasons, we say, no, handle it yourself? No, when African countries come to France and say, we have an issue here with terrorism, here with piracy, if they come to us, we sit down together and we think about a security plan for them. And this is what we're currently doing with Ghana, Benin. This is what we did with the Gulf of Guinea when we had to fight against piracy. And it's what we're doing with other countries calling for equipment. It's what we're doing with Egypt when we have training packages put in place. Africa isn't any different to other continents, so we need to work in partnerships. And each of these countries, they engage with France normally, with respect. So I think we need to end with this idea that deep down, you need to treat France with disrespect to be truly African. This is what the coup leaders have done. No, respect goes both ways. So we too want to be respected.
Mr. President, a few months ago you said they forgot to thank us. That created some strong reactions among African leaders. For example, the leader of Chad reacted.
Well, maybe we should ask Mr. Deby. Ask Mr. Deby what he thinks of this. You know, he asked us that we need to create a defense relationship, and we're doing it with him.
I mean, when you speak of ingratitude...
Yes, but the ingratitude that I'm talking about, this is also ingratitude that is shown to soldiers from Chad, or from Mali, from Guinea, who also lost their brothers in arms. It's just what you do between partners. It's what we do around the world.
If you're just joining us, we're in Nairobi, where the Africa Forward Summit is winding up. Emmanuel Macron is our special guest here at RFI, France 24, and TV5 Monde. Concerning the conflict in the eastern part of DRC, Mr. President, Rwanda's support for M23 has been documented by UN experts. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on the Rwandan army and some of its leaders. Why have France and the EU not done the same?
We uphold a position whereby we're going to keep discussing with all stakeholders, and we're going to put down a clear line: respect of territorial integrity and sovereignty. So that means withdrawal of all forces, not just Rwandan forces, all forces that are present on Congolese soil. Number two, getting back to political dialogue with the DRC and the M23, which was actually spearheaded by Angola. And three, DRC needs to get back control of the east of the country, again with all of the work that has been done with FDLR. And fourth, we all need to work together to fight off terrorist organizations, threatening the situation in the country, but also in the region. So I think with that, with effective dialogue, both presidents need to come back together to mediate so that we can move forward on a shared project, one that focuses on those 4 key points.
They were here in Nairobi. Did you meet with them?
Yes, I did, but I met them separately because, as you probably saw, they were both there, but not at the same time. Obviously, there is tension afoot between the two. So I met them both on multiple occasions, and I think today what we now need to do all together, for anyone who is working on this topic, the African Union obviously needs to spearhead all of the work. It's important for me to work alongside the African Union, as I've been doing over the past 9 years with African mediators. So, the African Union, with Chairman 4, with the various mandates under a number of presidents, and we need to also work with American partners, Qatari partners, bringing us all together. This is actually what I'll be speaking about with the African Union and the United Nations. I think it's going to be more effective if we can get everyone together to move forward together. What we need now is for the 2 leaders to build an agreement built upon those 4 items that I just mentioned, and then put in place the necessary decisions to ensure Congolese sovereignty.
But isn't the state of play rigged with the intervention of the United States? They seem to be taking over the situation.
Well, the United States, they seem to want peace. So I don't think that we can say it's a rigged game, per se.
But they are taking charge of events in the eastern part of the DRC.
Well, with the hindsight that I have on this specific case, is that many people have come in to take the lead, and then they hand the lead on to someone else. And that's a problem. There is a peace agreement that was signed a few months ago, but it's not necessarily full peace that we now have. So we need to be quite wary of that. So the United States, they are stepping in. Fantastic. We need to come back to principles. We need to bring things back to a peaceful climate so we can get the leaders to sit around the discussion table.
What you're saying, Mr. President, is that we should stop relying on sanctions? Is that what you're saying?
I think everyone is trying to toe the line of the United States to sideline Rwanda. But I don't think if we do that, then Rwanda is going to be cooperative. I, however, believe in the virtues of dialogue with the 2 leaders. And this is what we need to have with Uganda, Burundi, countries in the region, so that we can clarify exactly what is happening on the ground, how many forces are on the country, and to also clarify the fact as to what is happening economically in the east of the country. And what I believe, and what I'm going to do on behalf of France, is fight for respectful dialogue that brings Presidents Kagame and Tshisekedi together. And this is the objective that we have set on behalf of France.
We're just a 3-hour flight from Nairobi. Just a 3-hour flight from here in Nairobi, there is a savage war that is tearing Sudan apart. It's been going on for 3 years. What can you say about the situation in Darfur today? Is it a genocide?
I'm always very wary of using such words because that word is something that judges, legal specialists and historians will decide. What is happening is crimes of mass scale, war crimes. The humanitarian situation is quite catastrophic. The DRC is also in a dire humanitarian situation. So currently in Sudan, our position is what it was right since the peaceful revolution that went through Sudan, is to support the movement. I actually met for the very first time the government with Mr. Hamdok and all of the young women who underpinned that peaceful revolution, who carried forward Sudanese civil society with a true ambition and an agenda that we supported, with debt that we helped restructure. And then what happened is you have warlords splitting up territory, and the conflict that we now have is one where we absolutely must have a ceasefire as fast as possible. We also need to have an end to any form of foreign financial aid, to no matter which side of this conflict we're talking about. Because Sudan has become a place where third-party countries are now fighting against each other, but through Sudan, they're using their own influence.
Shouldn't they be sanctioned then?
I mean, we sanction so much as it is. I think what we need to do is we'll take stock of this declaration that is backed by all heads of state, where we clearly say what the case is for both conflicts. We need to have an end for foreign interference. Foreign powers need to stop financing conflict by siding with one side or the other, and we need to have an end to private security forces running rife in these countries. This is what we have for Nairobi. So in Sudan, we need to have a fast ceasefire. We need to have pressure on all those countries who are sending money to these countries. We need to dismantle at the same time. And actually, that's what we're going to be doing in the coming months. And we're going to try and get together all of these people together so that we'll stop providing financial aid. And we need to have a civil solution, a civilian solution. France, we hosted our own humanitarian political conference with civil society recently. Last year, Berlin is going to organize a humanitarian conference soon. So we need to keep that work up. But first and foremost, we need to have an end to the armament and to the foreign funding.
The war in the Middle East, Mr. President, has had consequences around the world. Obviously, this is something that you must have discussed with your African counterparts. So what do they say? What are they expecting from France, who will be presiding the G7 this year?
They said to me what I have already said multiple times in the past. This is our underlying principle of our policy for the past few years. We always want to try and defend the voice of Africa in major crises. COVID-19. It was the first time that a non-African leader was invited to the African Union Bureau, where we're able to build the Alliance for Vaccination and Diagnostics. In 2022, beginning of the Russian attack in Ukraine, France was there with the Farm Initiative to ensure African food security. We also have Farm Plus with Pres.Macro, strong involvement there, to show that French companies are there to try and help change the situation. We have already seen a considerable drop in cereal crops, in cereal being sent from Ukraine, fertilizer as well, coming from Russia through the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of that goes to the world, but also to Africa. So the impact of that conflict on the continent has been drastic. This has an impact on prices and therefore on purchasing power. So therefore we need to have more mobilization for the local economies. This is what we have been doing with the G7, with the guarantee mechanisms and investment. But it's also up to us to speak on behalf of Africa to say that reopening the Strait of Hormuz is an absolute priority. This is the first step of any agenda when talking about the Middle East. This is what France has been doing from day one. We've been calling for a ceasefire and we've been calling for the Strait of Hormuz to be open. We have to do that before we can move on to any other negotiation points.
But the situation seems to be a complete standoff between the Americans and the Iranians today. It doesn't seem like dialogue is possible.
What I do see is that there has been an escalation in various statements, and I think it's a very sorry state of affairs. What we are doing is quite simple. We are staying in contact with everyone, our American allies, we're speaking with all countries in the region. We're staying in contact with Iran as well. I think that the solution to what is happening now has to start with a ceasefire that is upheld, fully upheld. Currently, it is not the case when we look at Lebanon. So the ceasefire needs to be fully upheld in Lebanon, in all countries. It wasn't the case when the United Arab Emirates were hit. Second, we absolutely must have the Strait of Hormuz reopened with no conditions and free passage. By breaking down the blockades and having a very clear conversation with Iran. So we have worked with the United Nations to come up with a framework, a purely neutral, peaceful framework, and we and the United Kingdom put together an ad hoc group of 50 countries to do that work, and then we're going to be able to move forward with dialogue on nuclear matters, on missiles between Iran and the United States, and then we have the E3 nations, UK, Germany, France, and we need to actually include all countries of the region because they are the most directly affected by the current situation. They're also affected by the destabilization that we are seeing created by the militia.
Mr. President, Donald Trump has chosen to expel migrants that he doesn't want anymore in his country towards Africa. Europe is also hardening its migratory policies. We've just learned, for example, that there are discussions that may be held with the Taliban to send migrants back to Afghanistan. What is next? One day will we see African migrants being sent back to Africa?
Well, I think on these sorts of matters, I think we need to be true to our own principles. We need to be practical and also very clear on what we are willing to do and what we will never do. Europe has been facing strong migratory pressure for the past few years. We can see it in the figures, in the statistics. Now, can we just do nothing? Well, our nations, citizens, are calling us to change, to respond to the situation. And we have social security systems that are quite generous, so therefore we need to adapt to this changing migratory pressure.
We're talking about Afghanistan and Taliban.
No, yes, I understand, but here we're going to talk about what France and Europe are doing. And Europe as a whole has had a policy to have stricter borders. The Asylum Immigration Compact enables us to have better records of those people entering European soil, which means we can have more effective systems to return people back home. And then we also have those men and women who fought for freedom and are now living in danger in their own countries. So we need to, obviously, live up to our own principles, uphold them. So we need to protect our values and thereby protect those men and women. Because we have the European Convention on Human Rights, we have to uphold those values. So we need to be stricter when entering European soil. We need to find ways to help people get back to the country sooner and faster. There's a lot that we can do bilaterally because there are a lot of countries doing fantastic things, others who aren't being fair play. So we need to be true to our own values, true to peace, protect those men and women who are putting their own lives on the line in their home countries because they are in war-torn countries. Now, I don't necessarily feel comfortable with the fact that we can send people back to countries that aren't their home countries, men and women, simply because we've got agreements where money is at play, where we can send them to third countries.
So this is the policy?
Well, I'm not naming names, but France, as long as I am in power, I'm going to continue with our policy. Because this is our migratory policy that we've had for a number of years now. And France upheld the asylum immigration policy, which I think is very effective. But we also have values that I will uphold, and I think we need to be quite humane with our policy.
Mr. President, there are so many things that we would like to ask you, but we don't have enough time. You're just 1 year from the end of your term of office. In Ouagadougou in 2017, you initiated and have continued to initiate many reforms. Some of them have not come to fruition. What would you wish that you had done that you were not able to do?
Well, I'd like to talk about things that we haven't spoken about that I have done. So there was something that no one believed in back in Ouagadougou, giving back works of art. Well, I remember when I said it, people said, it'll never work.
It did take 10 years.
Sure, but we did it, and it started a movement within Europe, a fantastic movement. So we gave back to Benin 26 treasures. We gave back to Senegal, to Côte d'Ivoire, to Madagascar, and just a few days ago, to unanimous vote. What was very important for us is because it was a change of the way people saw it in our country, that to unanimous vote in French Parliament, we passed laws on this. So we can see that there's been a cultural shift. It changed the way people view it. We can change the way that museum curators work, the way the youth will see it, the way artists will see these works. It changes the way the entire world will see how we can engage with this. Second, Africa is a continent of sports. We haven't spoken about sports so far, but we should have, because sporting policy is so important. We have public and private financing for over 500 sports facilities throughout the continent, with fantastic French companies. We have partnerships with the NBA, FIBA, FIFA, for soccer, basketball, athletics. Because of all of that, the youth of Africa can think of sports, can get better sporting education, be in better health. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the wealth of a continent. Sporting around the world is 2% of GDP, but in Africa it's only 0.5%. And it's simply because, for some reason, athletes are going elsewhere, where money can be found. So I'm going to attend Dakar for the Youth Olympic Games, the first to be held this year, and then we will have a fantastic African Nation Cup, and then the World Cup, also in Africa, with games being held in Morocco. So it's fantastic what's happening. Sport, reform, health as well. We have fantastic initiatives in place with co-production of vaccines, completely unheard of prior to COVID. But what we did is we put in place a policy. I went out to Rwanda and South Africa to say, we're going to make with you vaccines, and we are now doing it. The Institut Pasteur is transferring its technology out to its facilities in Dakar for its vaccines against chikungunya. We've put in place platforms with BioVac and the like to be able to produce health solutions for Africans with Africans on African soil. It's a revolution. It's crazy that it was never done before. 20% of Africa's vaccine needs are only met with 15% production in Africa. So we are changing things. And economic relations, it's essential. The 23 billion I was talking about earlier, that is a revolution in its own right. In the past, no French president ever came to Kenya. I came in 2019, and now I have come back again, and we have the France-Africa Summit. It's a fantastic summit that we held. Here we're at Africa Forward, another main change in mindset. So we've got culture, sports, entrepreneurs, the way people view the nation, economic partnerships, monetary partnerships. In fact, France was there to say that the African Union should have a permanent seat at the G20. This is just one of many successes that I could talk about. It's more than just security partnerships with countries like Ghana, Benin, and Nigeria. Nigeria, we never really spoke about security with Nigeria in the past, but we're now talking about it. We're talking about the future. I actually have no regrets. I feel that there is a lot of ambition to be had for this continent, and I love the African continent. I think it is the youngest continent, the most dynamic continent of all. And I want our companies and my fellow citizens to hear that as a message. But if I just may, to wrap up, I want the youth of France to understand that our fate is tied with the African continent's fate, that we will succeed with Africa. And there are some 17 million French people who are part of the African diaspora. So we are part of this continent. It is a great chance for us as French. There are millions of French people who are French Malian or French Algerian or French Senegalese. So we have this great chance to be able to succeed alongside the African continent. So no regrets, just ambition and a great thirst for the future. I think we need to change the way we talk about Africa. Just don't look at what isn't going well. We need to think that there is fantastic ambition here for Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And thank you so much for having me here with you.
Thank you for giving us this interview, and thank you all for watching us on TV5 Monde, Radio France Internationale, and France 24.
Cette semaine, le Paris des Arts vous emmène sur l'île de la Martinique. À l'honneur, deux invités qui vont nous parler d'identité et de mémoire. Le musicien Izzy Kenanga et la plasticienne Valérie John.
La Martinique, c'est